Okay, we're here on Daf Chav Tes, and we're up to Omer Rabbi Oven, which is on the bottom of the Amud, 2 lines up before the end of the Amud. And the Gemara wants to prove from the Mishnah at the beginning of this perek that Rabbi Elazar is correct. Okay then? So Omer Rabbi Oven, Afanan Nami Tanina. We can also, says Rabbi Oven, prove Rabbi Elazar from the words of Beit Shammai in our Mishnah. Okay, so we'll wait a minute for Mitch and for Jeff. Just 1 second. So here on the bottom of Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph, we have a case of 2 brothers that are married to 2 sisters and they die, and these 2 Yevamos, these 2 sisters, fall in front of an additional 2 brothers. And each of these 2 sisters come to under the erva of Achos Zikukasa. So let's say, for example, we have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. They all share the same brother, the same father. So they are all paternal brothers. And Rachel and Leah are sisters. Reuven marries Rachel, Shimon marries Leah, and now Reuven dies, and Rachel falls for Yibum in front of Levi and Yehuda. Afterwards, Shimon dies, and Leah, his wife, falls in front of Levi and Yehuda. So now both Rachel and Leah have fallen for Yibum in front of Levi and Yehuda, and each one of these 2 sisters generates an erva category called Achos Zikukasa. Beit Shammai Omrim, in such a case, according to Beit Shammai, each one of the brothers could be miyabim one of the Yevamos. In other words, Levi, for example, could be miyabim Rachel, and Yehuda Leah, and Yekaimu. And there's no need to compel any sort of a get. That's what it says in our Mishnah attributed to Beit Shammai, this ruling. So comes along Rabbi Oven, and he says, Afanan Nami Tnin. He's medayik from the language of Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai say Yekaimu. What does that mean, Yekaimu? L'chora, the Mishnah could have said a different language. It could have said Misyabmos, meaning Bezdin should instruct them, right? Levi to be miyabim Rachel and Yehuda to be miyabim Leah. No, it says Yekaimu. In other words, they did not apparently ask Bezdin what they should do. They took the initiative on their own, and each one married the Yevamos. And now we want to know whether we have to force a get in each of these cases. And that's where Beit Shammai say Yekaimu. But that's only, again, post facto, because they took the law into their own hands. Then Beit Shammai are going to say, we'll be matir to the Yevamim to continue their marriage relationship, Levi with Rachel and Yehuda with Leah, and we're not going to force again. But l'chatchila, if they would have come to Bezdin, these 2 Yevamim, meaning Levi and Yehuda, they would have asked, what should we do in this case? Lo. Even Beit Shammai would agree that we would not be matir them l'chatchila to marry these 2 Yevamos. Why? Because even Beit Shammai accept, at least on a l'chatchila level, if all things are done properly, the Iser of Achos Zikukasa, which means that both sisters are Zikuka Liyibum to both brothers, to both Yehuda, to Levi and Yehuda. So the machlokas here between Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel is in a case of B'di'evet, but in a case of L'chatchila, even Beit Shammai would agree that we should insist on recognizing the erva of Achos Kukaso, and both of these sisters should be receiving chalitza and not Yidin. Now, how does this support Rabbi Lazar. It's Omer Rabbi Ovin Afanan Nami Tnina. So he's trying to establish through our Mishnah and the diuk of Yekaimu, which is only b'diavad, not l'chatchila, to establish support for the position, the interpretation of Rabbi Elazar. So let's just review Rabbi Elazar, which you'll see here just 2 or 3 lines earlier, which is about 5 lines before the end of Daf Chof Tes Amud Aleph. And he says the following. If, let's say, one of the Yevamim, let's call him Levi, he did a maimer with Rachel, so lo tema, don't interpret it that maimer, according to Beit Shammai, is kona kinyan gomur. Maimer Beit Shammai eino kona, el litchos sora bilvad. Right, so that we're not going to block the possibility of yibum to the tzara, meaning to the other sister. Okay, 1 second. So let's just review that last. That's where we stopped yesterday of litchos pitzara el litchos pitzara bilvad. So you may recall that we said that the action of Maimar, in other words, the initiative of Maimar, accomplishes a goal. And what is that goal? It's going to allow for Yehuda to be miyabim Leah. Correct? In other words, you might have said that as a result of Maimar, right? Yabim. Right. That you might have said that since I got to get the names. I'm sorry. Since Leah, right? Leah fell for Yibum, and she's achos Rachel. That should force the hand of Levi to give a get to Rachel, and that's what we're saying. El lidchos Sarah b'tzara bilvat. Right? He says the following. He says, Rachel nafel l'fnei Levi v'asa ba maimer. Achakaf meis Shimon b'lo banim v'nafel Leah l'fnei Levi. So now both Rachel and Leah fell for Yibum to Levi, and you might have said the following: that Zikas Leah, right? Leah is the wife of Shimon. That makes Leah into a quasi tzara of Rachel, based on the fact that now Leah also is kuka to Levi. And comes along Beit Shammai, they say that zika to Leah, when Shimon dies and Leah falls for Yibum to Levi, is Eina Makeves al Rachel. In other words, once Maimar made that kinyan to Rachel, then the achos kukaso, with the death of Shimon and the falling of Leah to Levi as a Yevama, is not going to undermine the marriage relationship that was generated by Maimar between Rachel and Levi. We're going to recognize that marriage, and the kinyan of Rachel through Maimar is now going to materialize and upgrade to the level of Yibum. Now, once that happens, then you may recall that we discussed the other day that Leah goes free now. She doesn't need, Yibum is not a possibility because she's achos ishto mamish. But even beyond that, she doesn't even need chalitza because of the erev of achos isha, which is one of the 15 arayas. Again, all that is a result of the maimar that was implemented by Levi with Rachel. Okay. So now we turn to Daf Chav Tesam and Beis. Isal Kedai Maimar Lebeit Shammai Kona Kinyan Gomur. Now, you may recall that Rabbi Lazar, when analyzing Beit Shammai, he rejected a Havami. You might have said that, which is totally wrong, says Rabbi Lazar, that according to Beit Shammai, the mimer itself is a full-fledged Kinyan Ishus, like any Kesef Shtar Ubiyah. Again, that's an impossible position, but Rabbi Lazar says you could have understood it that way, and the implication would be that if Levi wants to terminate his relationship of Ishus with Rachel, he simply gives her a get, and there's no need for chalitza. Why? Because Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomer. So now the Gemara is saying, Isal Kedaitach Maimer LeBeit Shammai Kona Kinyan Gomer. If Maimer, which is, let's say, Kesef or Shtar, is equal to Bia, which Bia in the case of Yevamot would be Kona Kinyan Gomer, so then why would Beit Shammai agree that Lechatchila he should not be Miyabed? Right? He should be Choles both Rachel and Leah. That's not so. Ze Yaseh Maimer v'yikne. Ze Yaseh Maimer v'yikne. What's the problem over here? Why is Beit Shammai hesitant, or shall we say inhibited, about the following possibility? Let each one of the two brothers implement Maimar with respectively the two sisters. And what's going to happen then? Let's say Levi, after his Maimar with Rachel, he is Kona Rachel with a Kinyan Gomer. And now the status of Leah after Shimon dies is that of Achos Ishta. Correct? So, in a case of Achos Kukaso, we would say that he should give a chalitza. But here it's a case of Achos Ishta. Why? Because we're holding in the Havamina that Beit Shammai defines Maimer as a Kinyan Gomer. If it's a Kinyan Gomer, then Leah's status vis-a-vis Levi is that of an Ashes of Achos Ishta. So there's nothing inhibiting the marriage between Levi and Rachel, because Leah is she's not in the picture at all. There's no Zika at all. And now when we get to Leah and her relationship with Yehuda, the other brother, once again, Yehuda could be Kona with Maimar. And you might say, wait a minute, how could Yehuda be Kona with Maimar? Isn't she Achos Kukasa? Because with the death of Ruvain, Rachel, his wife, fell for even to Yehuda as well. And now Yehuda has two Yevamos in front of him, and there's a Zika to both of them, and they have to be sisters. So how can we allow for a marriage between between Leah and Yehuda? And the answer is because once Levi has married Rachel, and it's a Kinyan Gomer according to this Havamina, then there should be no problem whatsoever for Yehuda to marry Leah, because Leah, let's go the other way around, because Rachel is no longer Achos Kukasa, or maybe better the other way I said, because Leah is no longer Achos Kukasa, because that Zika relationship is gone. It's history. Through Maimar, Levi was Kona a Kinyan Gobbler of a full-fledged Ichus vis-a-vis Rachel, and therefore Rachel is no longer a Zkuka, such that Leah would be Achos Kukas. So this is where Ravin steps up to the plate, and he says, wait a minute, we were medayik from the Lashon of Beit Shammai, Yekaimu, that this is only a B'diavad situation. Once Levi took the law into his own hands, and he was Makadesh Rachel with Kesef or Shtar, which we call Maimer, then we recognize that marriage, and Yibum will be fulfilled. But L'chatchila, we should avoid it because of Achos Kukasa. That was the diuk and the conclusion of Ravin. And that would make no sense if you hold that according to Beit Shammai, Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomer, because then Levi can go ahead and do a Maimer, and that's exactly what we should encourage. And that's equal to Yibum. He's Kona Kinyan Gomer. And then Yehuda will be Kona Kinyan Gomer through Maimer vis-a-vis Leah. Well, why is this all b'diavad? Elamai, we have to prove from Beit Shammai that Maimer is doche techia gemura. Right? That even though Maimer is not Kona, it's not a complete kinyan in the case of a Yevama, but nevertheless, it's doche the zika to Leah, if you follow what I mean. Such that when we consider the relationship, the marriage relationship through Maimer between Levi and Rachel, we don't have to worry about Leah as an Achos Kukaso with the death of Shimon, because Maimer is doche that status of Achos Kukaso. The Maimer itself is enough to remove a zika between Leah and Levi. Why? Because Levi is now, so to speak, married Rachel, and with that marriage relationship, Leah becomes an erva of Achos Ishto. That's the significance of Maimer according to Beit Shammai. So that's called Doche Techia Gemura. And that's so far the way Rabbi Ovin understood Beit Shammai. The Gemara is not happy with that, but that's the underlying premise or called conclusion of Rabbi Ovin, that the Maimer is meaningful not to be Konik and Gomer, but to be Doche the Zika to Leah, so that Leah will not generate an Isra of Achos Kukaso vis-a-vis Rachel and force a divorce. So Gemara says, wait a second, I have a problem with this. Rabbi Ovin, I don't understand and appreciate your logic and your derivation. Why? How do you justify the fact that in the light of your diuk, you conclude that Beit Shammai l'chatchila would prohibit Yibum? I have a simple solution to this, which would lead us to the conclusion that we should encourage Yibum, even l'chatchila. And that is Ze Yasa Maimer v'Yitche, V'Ze Yasa Maimer v'Yitche. You are telling me, Rabbi Ovin, that the inherent power of Maimer not to be Konik Gom, but the Doche and the Zika to the other sister, then why not encourage Maimer l'chatchila for both brothers, meaning Levi vis-a-vis Rachel and Yehuda vis-a-vis Leah? Why not encourage them? Because the Maimer of Levi will undermine and cancel the Zika to Leah. Because that's the whole point of Beit Shammai. It's not that Maimer is what is Konik Inyan Gomer, but it removes the Zika to Leah, because now Leah becomes Ashes Achos Ishto. And then if you talk about the relationship between Leah and Yehuda, and you're worried about Rachel being a generating the Isser of Achos Kukaso, well, Maimer is going to remove that Zika. Zika in this case to Rachel, so that all systems are go, The roads are clear for Leah to be Misyabenes to Yehuda. So what's the problem with Chatchila over here? So now, at this point in the Gemara is facing the following challenge. On the one hand, Rabbi Oven has a very beautiful diuk from the word Yekaimu to conclude that Beit Shammai are only b'di'evet and not lechatchila. And on the other hand, what? Well, what is it in Beit Shammai that would block yibum lechatchila? So he says the following: Elamai Isla Meimar. Maimer de Tera. In other words, everything depends upon the sequence of events in terms of the deaths of Reuven and Shimon. Right? We want to plug in Maimar. And the question, right, Maimar between Levi and Rachel. The question is, when did that Maimar take place? Was it before or after the death of Shimon and the nefila of Leah Eshes Shimon Liyibu? So we have one category, which is called Maimar Dehetera. So that means Maimar Dehetera means the Maimar was wedged in chronologically between the death of Reuven and the death of Shimon. After the death of Reuven, Levi did a Maimar with Eshes Reuven, with Rachel. That's called what? Maimar Dehetera. In such a case, according to the logic of Beit Shammai, that Maimar accomplishes the goal of invalidating or uprooting the Zika when Shimon dies to Leah. However, then it's something called Maimar de Isura. And what's that case? It means that Shimon died, Leah fell for Yibum, and then subsequently Levi implemented a Maimar to Rachel. He writes here, Shenasa b'Yevamot, the Maimar that was done, and I'm assuming he means the Maimar of Levi to Rachel, b'Yevamot she'asura l'syabe b'shas ha'Maimar, right? Because Leah had already fallen for Yibum at the moment that Levi did the Maimar with Rachel. So if Leah had already, Shimon had already died and Leah fell for Yibum, he says, Shtei achil shenafu shteihen l'fnei achil. So now we have both Rachel and Leah falling in front of both Levi and Yehuda. Is now we have Achos Ishta. And again, what's the status of Achos Ishto? According to Beit Shammai, we're now saying that Achos Ishto is a valid, or shall I say, well-recognized erva that would undermine Yibum. Is therefore lo dochi. His Maimar, meaning Levi's Maimar to Rachel, cannot be doche the Zikas Leah, because that Zikas Leah is already a reality. In other words, Maimar, when it's done beheter, because right now Baruch Hashem Shimon is alive and well, so there's no Isser involved here in Levi saying Areya Mekudeshesly to Rachel. That could create new facts on the ground. Now he has started the process of Yibum. He has engendered a state of Ishus to Rachel, such that now, when Shimon dies subsequently and his wife Leah falls for Yibum, we're going to say that there are new facts on the ground. At the moment that Leah fell for Yibum, Rachel had already been married off, so to speak, to Levi, and therefore the status of Leah is that of an Achos Ishto. She doesn't fall for Yibum, and there's no Achos Kukas. But in a case of Isura, where both Rachel and Leah have already fallen for Yibum to Levi because Shimon already died and Levi has not yet implemented Maimer, that Maimer is called a Maimer Bisura, meaning it cannot culminate in Yibum legally, or at least L'chatchila, because it is coming to break and disqualify an already existing Achos Kukaso Is. Does everybody follow that? In other words, to view Maimar as the beginning of Yibum in a situation of Achos Ishto, of Achos Kukaso, because Leah already fell for Yibum, so Rachel is Achos Kukaso, that Maimar is illegitimate as the beginning of the process of Yibum because of Achos Kukaso, even according to Beit Shammai, and therefore L'chatchila, in a case where Leah already fell for Yibum, we cannot encourage Levi, to implement Maimar as the beginning of Yibum, because Leah has now fallen for Yibum, already fallen for Yibum, which generates a status of Achos Kukasa with regard to Rachel. So now you're not allowed to go ahead and start the process of Yibum with Kesef or Shtar. Maimar, Afilu Leman Diomar. Oh, this is interesting. We never actually saw a Man Diomar. We only saw a Havam, but now the Gemara is using the language Man Diomar. Leman Diomar, Maimar Kona Kinyan Gomur. Right now we're playing the devil's advocate against Rabbi Oven, because Rabbi Oven wanted to prove that Beit Shammai is not operating with Kinyan Gomur, that Maimer is a Kinyan Gomer, because if so, why L'chatchila was he balking about it? Why was he hesitant about it? He should have allowed it L'chatchila. This is a perfect solution to achieve Yibum through Maimer, because Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomer. So the Gemara says, no, even if I agree that Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomer according to Beit Shammai, nevertheless, we should differentiate between Maimer Dad Terah and Maimer Di Surah. So Maimer Di Surah means she's not allowed to be Misyat Benes. Why? Because Shtei Ha'achios Omdos L'fnei Ha'yevamim, right? In other words, Shimon has already died, Leah has already fallen for Yibum. V'kol achas ma'keves al achos yav mishum achos kukaso is therefore lo kani. The only point that I think is not clear in this sugya, in my humble opinion, is b'di'evet, meaning when we saying Maimer Di Surah, it means that since Shimon has already died and Leah has already fallen for Yibum, and therefore there's Achos Kukaso, therefore we're inhibited about allowing Maimer or Yibum because there's already a situation of Achos Kukaso. But now we're saying that in that scenario, in those circumstances, b'di'evet, we would not break up the marriage. And again, I think what's going on in this Gemara here is that according to Beit Shammai, Achos Kukaso, with all due respect, is not all cracked up. achos kukaso is a violation, but it doesn't remove zikas yibum, or for that matter, even mitzvahs yibum. And basically, the Rabbanan is saying, hold off here. Don't go ahead and change the reality on the ground and start a process of yibum, because she is achos kukaso. That's the status of Rachel when Leah falls for yibum. But if he went ahead on his own initiative and he began the process of yibum with an ishus of Maimar, and now the Gemara is going according to the possibility, which we never knew this was a maskana, but apparently there is such a that Maimar according to Beit Shammai is Kohen Kinyan Gomer, then B'di'eved, that Kinyan Gomer will trump the Iser of Achos Kukas. He says, Al Kain, Hayevamim Asurim Lichnos Lechatchila. Oh, he does mention the word Lechatchila here. Right, John, you have the Gemara? I forget. If you have the Gemara, it's the top line on the left column. He says Lechatchila, Afilu al Yidei Maimar. Okay, so the recognition or the acknowledgement of the status, the legal status of Achos Kukaso is enough to prohibit Yibum, or for that matter, even Maimar, Lechatchila. Lechatchila. That's the word we have to underline. I hope you have it in another form, at least in your Gemara. Leficha, ein lo chiach. You can't prove me divrei Beit Shammai shelo itiru liachim lichnos al yedei Maimar. Right, since you were medayik justifiably, Rabbi Oven, that Beit Shammai would not allow lechatchila the achim to be kones, meaning Levi to be miyabein Rachel and Yehuda to be miyabein Leah, or not even Maimar, they wouldn't even allow. Beit Shammai would not allow. Now Maimar ain't no kona kinyan gomer. Now you're proving that Maimar is not a kinyan gomer. Yesh lit, I can reject it. Why? Because since the Maimar is now being implemented after the death of Shimon and after Leah falls for Yibum, and therefore both Rachel and Leah have the status of Achos Kupaso, that's why, Lechatchila at least, Maimar is not going to be permissible, even according to Beit Shammai. But I want to read to you the language. He says, Ein ha-Maimar kona kinyan gomur lafkia es zikas hachos sheyia Yevamot lichnos es yivimta. So and he has a note here from the Ritva to explain Rabbi Oven, but we're not up to Rabbi Oven. We want to understand the Chia of the Gemara of Rabbi Oven. According to the sum of the Gemara, we'll call it, even if Maimar was Kona Kinyan Gomor, but nevertheless, Beit Shammai would agree that Chatchila at Kinyan Gomer, since it clashes with the Iser Vachos Kukaso, is not going to be permitted. Again, reading his language, Kevat Shemaimar Achim Nasa B'Yavama Asura L'Syabim Mishum Achos Kukaso. Oh, but here, this is the part that I read before that catches our attention here. He says, L'kach, ein ha-Maimar kone kinyan gomur, lafkia es zikas ha-achos, yia Yevamot lichnos es yivimto. So I think the word mutter here means mutter l'chatchila. I think. I don't know why he didn't add that word, but right, lahatir lichnos es yevimta. So we're missing here a little bit of lomdus, but let's get the mechanics first, That's something else. First get the facts on the ground before you say lomdus. So the facts on the ground is that on the one hand, the Gemara is pushing the agenda that Beit Shammai hold that Maimer is Konik Gomer. On the other hand, we're pushing another agenda which contradicts the first one, that even Beit Shammai recognized Achos Kukaso as a blockage preventing evil. And the reconciliation of this, this conflict is going to be l'chatchila b'di'evet. That l'chatchila we're not going to allow Maimer, even though it's Konik Kinyan Gomer. And that's because Maimer is meant to be the beginning of Yibum, and Yibum itself is prohibited because even Beit Shammai recognized Achos Kukas. So when we talk about a scenario in which Shimon has already died before the Maimer, meaning Leah has already fallen for Yibum to Levi before Levi was Maimer Rachel, which means when Rachel's status as an Achos Kukas was already matured, has already been validated and established. So therefore, certainly we understand l'chatchila, we can't use Maimar, even though it has the power of a Kinyan Gomer, to be doche, the Iser of Achos Kukas. However, once the Maimar was implemented, it's a Kinyan Gomer. And if it's a Kinyan Gomer, then Leah's status vis-a-vis Levi is that of Eishes, an Erev of Eishes Acher. It'd be interesting to ask the following question: what would the Gemara say about Yehuda in this case? Yehuda has not yet done a Maimar with Leah. Can we allow him to do that l'chatchila? And the reason I say that is because Rachel is out of the picture now. Levi did what he wasn't supposed to do, but he did it. And he did a Maimer, which is Konik Kinyan Gomer of Rachel. And at this point, the Zika of Rachel is history. It's gone like the genie, right? So therefore, I think we could make an argument that Yehuda could now l'chatchila do a Maimar and Yibum with Leah. We've removed completely the Yisur of Achos Kukas, which was the reason why we inhibited l'chatchila from the get-go, Levi doing a Maimar with Rachel. But once he did the Maimar and Maimar's Konik Kinyan Gomer went to the Gemara, I don't think there should be any reason to inhibit a Yibum between Yehuda and Leah. Like Kach Nirel and Yizdaiki. I don't know if you gentlemen agree with about that. If you have any objection, or forever hold your peace. Now the Ritva here, in a very short footnote, wants to explain Rabbi Oven, because we've done a great job explaining the Gemara itself, but what did Rabbi Oven hold? But he says that according to the opinion of Rabbi Oven, Im Maimar Konik Kinyan Gomer is Yeshlo Lidchos Bechia Gemura Af B'Yavama She'ena Rashois Lihisyamin. What does that mean? I mean, the key phrase here is Dechia Gemura, which I guess means L'chatchila. Since Maimer's Konik Kinyan Gomer, I'll tell you what I think he means. The language is very obscure, but I'm just going to suggest the svara. If that's what they're trying to mind, great. If you didn't, we'll say it anyway. In a b'diavad situation, according to the Gemara, not according to Rabbi Avin, since Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomor, it effectually negates, undermines, disqualifies, evaporates the whatever word you want to use, the achos kukaso situation. Comes along Rabbi Avin, he says, if that be the case, then even lechatchila we should allow Maimer. Why? Because inherent in the Maimer, you're giving the Maimer a power to completely nullify the zika that would have generated an Isur of achos zikukasa. So what's the difference between lechatchila and the In other words, the Chachamim was saying, I don't know who it is. The Stam of the Gemara is arguing that we can't allow Maimar, but once effectuated, then Maimar will undermine and neutralize the Achos Kukasa. So comes along Rabbi Avin, he says, I can't understand that logic. If Maimar is Kona Kinyan Gomor, says Rabbi Avin, then that means that the Maimar and its Kinyan power just completely undermines the Achos Kukasa. So why don't you go that one step further and allow that lechatchila? There's no time T1 and time T2 here. There's no sequence because Och Kidei, let's call it Vasachas. And as soon as he does the Maimar, he is effectually B'taras Kinyan Gomor. He's effectually undermined the Achos Kukasa. So why not allow him to do that lechatchila? And again, the stakes are very high over here because we want to, and the Torah wants to be Mekayim in the midst of Yibum. Okay, we're up to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi Masni Hoch. Apparently, there's another tradition, or another we can call transmission of Rabbi Elazar. Omer Rabbi Elazar, Lo Tema Maimer lebeit Shammai dachi dechia gemura, and Sarasa chalitza nami lo boy. Okay, so as opposed to the original Lishna Kama of Rabbi Elazar, that Rabbi Elazar is coming lafuke kinyan gomur, that might right. That Rabbi Elazar says, no, Maimer is not Kona Kinyan Gomor. Don't even raise the possibility that according to Beit Shammai, Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomor. And that's what Rabbi Elazar is fighting against within the context of Beit Shammai. No. Comes along Rav Ashi, and he says that's not the Havamina that the Havamina in Beit Shammai that Rabbi Elazar is rejecting. But what Havamina is he rejecting? The Chia Gemura. We could have understood, and again, this is all in brackets because we're going to put a minus sign in front of the brackets, but we could have suggested the possibility that according to Beit Shammai, Maimar is able to effectuate a Dechia Gemura. And again, when we say Dechia Gemura, we mean the Zika between Leah and Levi when Shimon dies. And that Zika is now going to suffer a death blow. which we call a Dechia Gemura, as a result of the Maimar, such that there's nothing left of the Zika at all, again, between Leah and Levi. Utsarasa, Chalitza Nami Lo Boy. This is the way we've been understanding it all along. That once Maimar is effective to remove the Zika between Leah and Levi, Leah doesn't need Chalitza, according to Beit Shammai, because she's Achos Ishta. Comes along Rabbi Lazar, according to this transmission of Rav Ashi, and he says, no, that's completely incorrect. To assume that Leah does not need Chalitza as a result of the Maimar of Levi to Rachel, that's a big boo-boo, and Beit Shammai never said it. Ella, Doche u'Mishayeru, the power inherent in Maimar is only a partial power. It's what you call Doche u'Mishayer. On the one hand, it removes the Zika, but yet it's Mishayer. It's like tzitzin chain of ha'akfidas abilu. There's still something that connects the relationship between Leah and Levi. There's still some shirayim of Zika. It's unbelievable how you can cut Zika to so many different gradations. Now, what's the nafkamina here? And this is what Rav Ashi is going to try to prove in Beit Shammai, that Leah must receive chalitza. Why? Because there still is some Zika left. The Maimar, even according to Beit Shammai, of we'll call it Rachel, meaning obviously it means of Leah, obviously means Levi, but let's say the Maimar that Rachel receives is not enough to completely, how should I say, erase and negate and void the Zika to Leah. It does a partial bittul, if you will, but not a complete bittul of the Zika between Levi and Leah. It's a Zika, it's a bittul that's Mishayah, an incomplete bittul. Maybe instead of the word bittul, I'll use the word dechia. That's the Talmudic phrase. The Gemara used the word dechia, but it's a dechia with a shiur. In the Masechet, he calls it Mishayer Ma'at Zika. Ma'at Zika. You're taking a concept which is qualitative and you're making it into quantitative. I don't know how to do that. Either there's a Zika or there's no Zika. But he's saying Ma'at Zika. Obviously, you need love to see it. It's Feidinim. I don't know what you're going to say here, but you need something to explain Ma'at Zika. Either she's pregnant or she's not. What's Ma'at Zika? And again, Ma'at Zika means Leah. Right? And as a result of that, Shirayim of Ma'at Zika to Leah is Leah Eina Muteres Ninosin L'Chuk Below Chalitza. She needs Chalitza. That's not something that was apparent or intuitive when we first began to understand Beit Shammai. This is a whole new perspective. We thought that if Beit Shammai are recognizing the power of the Chia within the Maimar to Rachel, then Leah doesn't fall for Yibum at all to Levi. There's no seeker whatsoever. She doesn't need Chalitza. At least not from Levi. No, there's Shirayim, and there's still Zika left, and that means that Leah is still connected, so to speak, to Levi. There's still a connection. Because Maimer is not all that it's cracked up to be. With all the respect, Levi did a Maimer to Rachel, but it's not Mio De'ama. There's still a Zika to Leah. Leah therefore desperately needs Chalitza from Levi before she get married. Now, what the question that immediately arises in my mind, besides the ambiguous nature of Ma'at Zika, or whatever that means, I'm also wondering if the distinction that we made earlier when we were studying Rabbi Oven between L'chatchila or between Hetera and Isura, meaning when was this Maimar implemented? Was before Shimon died, in between the death of Reuven and the death of Shimon, or was it even after Shimon died? I don't know if any of those distinctions are relevant anymore. I'm not sure. So I'm going to read to you the Masifti writes, Leficha kasher haya Reuven Shimon v'Levi achim me'av. Okay, so right now we're dropping the fourth brother. There are only three brothers. Rachel v'Leachil, Nasa Reuven es Rachel, Shimon Nasa es Levi, Meis Reuven v'Lobanim v'Nafla Rachel if they Levi liyibum, v'Yasa v'Maimar. Okay, so now we're talking about Hetera. At the time of the Maimar, Shimon was still alive and well, and Leah did not fall for you. Achakach, Meis Shimon, v'Nafla Leah lifnei Levi liyibu. Rashay Levi lichnos es Rachel. Whoa, this is a major breakthrough. Here's where Rav Ashi is. There's going to be a double machlokus in between Rav Ashi and Rabbi Oven and how to understand Beit Shammai. Because now, wait a minute. No. I jumped the gun a little bit. Because again, we're talking about a case of Hetera. Oh, and Hetera, even Rabbi Oven allowed Maimer l'chatchila. Okay, I'm sorry. That I was jumping the gun. Again, how does he know this? I don't know, but that's what he assumes, that we're talking about a case of Rashay Levi Lichnos es Rachel, because Shimon is still alive and well, and Leah has not fallen for Yibum. Oh, wait a second. I'm going back and forth. He says, Meis Reuven b'libanim v'nafla Rachel lifnei Levi liyibum. V'asa b'mayim. Oh, that's what he does say. V'asa b'mayim. Okay, I was right. V'achakach Meis Shimon v'nafla Leah lifnei Levi liyibum. So again, let's think about it. Levi implemented Maim before Shimon died. And then now what? Now Shimon dies, and Leah falls to Yibum to Levi. Leah is going to need chalitza. That's this whole business about Meshayar. But he says here, Rashoy Levi Lichnos es Rachel. Shoy Levi lichnos es Rachel. So again, on the one hand, so this very paradoxical. On the one hand, we're saying that Leah needs chalitza, right? If Leah needs chalitza, it means there is a zika. And if there is a zika, how can we allow Levi to consummate his marriage with Rachel if she is achos kukas? And we've said over and over again that even Beit Shammai recognizes the legal category called achos kukas as a ma'akev in Yibum. So again, there's a note here, but it's very, very hard for me to make it out. I can't believe they published this. It's in dark print here. I'll try to do the best I can. I may actually have once a magnifying. Oh, how do you like that? I haven't picked this up in my hand for, I don't know, half a year at least. More than that. Don't they have this thing sells for 115 shekel. I don't know. Don't they have some sort of like editorial board or something? Okay. I'm going to read to you what it says. Oh, with the magnifying glass, it's a lot easier. Machadesh Rabbi Lozo, the Shitas Ravashi, unbelievable, is a Chadgadia. We're talking about Beit Shammai, and we're talking about Rabbi Loz's analysis of Beit Shammai according to Ravashi. Afilu Beit Shammai, Ein HaMaimar Sha'asa Levi Berachel, Doches Leah Achosa Legam, Shelo Tizdakek Yibum B'Misa Shimon, Mishum Achos Isha. Right? Lefisha Ein HaMaimar Kone Ela Min Rabbanon, Umin HaTorah Ein Rachel Nechsheves LeIshto, Ishto Shel Levi. Ela Kinyan HaMaimar Moil Rak Lidchos Es Leah Shelo Ta'asar Es Rachel Bailas HaMaimar Shel Levi Mishum Achos Kukasa. And he adds in a note here, which is very important. I think we thought of it too. Kevat she'isra achos kukasu rak midrabanan, and Kinyan Maimer is only drabanan. So you have two drabanans that are clashing one against the other. Is therefore moel Kinyan Maimer lahachshiv es Rachel ke'eshes Levi on a drabanan level. Inyan zeh shemidrabanan. Ein Leon is kekes levi liyivo. Again, that's only. We're not denying that on a derisa level, Maimer is impotent and it cannot remove the zika of Leah to Levi, and therefore she's going to need chalitza. That's on a derisa level. But on a drabbana level, Leah's zika is not recognized, so to speak, on a drabbana level. And then Afkamin is that now Rachel is not considered achos skukasa. And if that be the case, then we should go one step further, be very consistent, and Leah should not require chalitza. Because ein Leon is kekes levi leyivu, mishum sheyachos ishto midrabanan. Right? Because The accomplishment of Maimar is that on a Drabanan level, we view Leah as Achos Ishto. In other words, Levi is married Kaviyachol to Rachel. Umemela Eno Seres, Seres is a reference to Leah, Eno Seres Olav on Levi es Rachel, Mishum Achos Kukasa. So it's interesting. The Achos Ishto, which is status of Leah, which is generated by and a result of Maimar, undermines Achos Kukasa, as if to say the Zika doesn't exist because she's Achos Ishto, and there's no Zika in Achos Ishto. The Achrei Sheyibem Levi es Rachel, right? Because we said that the Drabanan of Achos Kukasa is so to speak suspended or negated as a result of the Maimar and the status of Achos Ishto. Is Techashev Ishto Minat Torah. In other words, until now, Maimar is only Ishus Drabanan in the case of Yevamot. But now, after Yibum, Rachel is Ishto Shel Levi Minat Torah. Is then Tipotel Leah Legami Michalit. So you might say logically that that's what should happen. Mishum Achos Ishto. But Aval in Ratzel Leah Li Nase L'Shuk Lifnei Yibum Shel Rachel. Oh boy, whoa! Now he throws in a whole. This is a question of sequence. You hear what's going on both sides? He's saying like this: does Rachel need chalitza? And there's a very complex answer to that. I'm sorry, starting in. Does Leah need chalitza? Sorry, flip of the tongue. Right? Does Leah need chalitza? And it's very complicated. He's saying that in stage number one, which is the Maimar stage, where Levi did Maimar to Rachel, at that point in time, Leah could not marry anyone else without chalitza. Why? Because the Maimar is only Kona Kinyan D'Rabbanan. And the Zika of Leah is Doraisa. But now we get to stage number two. And at that point, Levi, what's the word I want to look at? He consummated the marriage, or shall we say the Yibum, with Rachel. At that point, if I'm reading this correctly, Leah could marry anyone min hashuk without Yibum. Because now we've upgraded from a D'Rabbanan to a Doraisa. And once we do that, and apparently Beit Shammai is allowing that to happen, at that point, on a Doraisa level, Leah's status is that of a Achos Ishto. And she no longer needs Yibum. So she can't get, it's unbelievable. She's in the wings, you know what I'm saying? Her status is suspended in midair. She, right now, after the Maimar, is in a wait-and-see situation. She's in the back freezer. She can't get married without chalitza because the Maimar only generated a Kinyan D'Rabbanan. So she's not Achos Ishto on a D'Oraisa level. Now that Levi, at time T2, went ahead after doing Maimar and he consummated the marriage with Yibum, now Leah's status is that of Achos Ishto, an Ervan. She doesn't need chalitza, and she can marry anyone min hashuk. So kodem iratzel Leah li nasi l'shuk kodem hayibum shel Leah shel Rachel, meaning after Maimar but before knisa, before Yibum. Tzricha chalitza min Levi kidei lafkia zikas hayibum sholem in Torah. And now I'm going to fill in that's the end of the paragraph, but fill in the next sentence. But after Levi consummates the yibum with knisa, with bia, now the ichus is upgraded from Maimer D'Rabbanan to full-fledged ichus D'Oraisa, generating an erva situation of Leah of Achos Ishto. Now Leah could marry anyone without yibum, without chalitza. Unbelievable. I owe a debt of gratitude to myself for bringing, I don't know how many months ago. I don't know. I tell you. No, it's readable. I would ask Mitch, what level of vision you would need 2020. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's tiny. It's tiny.
Well, it's tiny
and it's
black
dark
on black.
Yeah,
black on dark.
Why? Yeah, they want to indicate that this is the commentary on the diagram. Okay, fine. Find a different way of doing that.
They can make it a little lighter. Even that wasn't good.
I don't know. I would like call up the editor. All right, we're going to stop here. So we're still in the middle of the sugya, but at least we made major progress because now we're going to go through the diuk in the Mishnah and see how it works out according to these shittas, Rabbi Oven and Ravash. All right, so I'll make a note. That's for tomorrow. Tomorrow is what? It's Thursday, right? Amar Rabbi Oven. Yeah. Okay. I mean, a lot of very nuances of point over here. Okay. You want to do me a favor, Jeff, and just open the door in case David might be there.